Was going to be hard after 2 goals conceded in the opening 7 minutes. A penalty dispatched by Chris Wood. Miguel Almiron with the second. Joelinton headed a third after 32, and Leicester had very, very little in response. It took them 82 minutes to get on shot on target. A couple of tame ones followed, but in the end, Matt Elliott, Leicester can have no complaints with the scoreline.
No, they were influential themselves on their own downfall, weren't they? Where they started the game, Newcastle were like a bull at a gate, closing, pressing, harassing Leicester. Leicester were sloppy, both in their decision making and their general play, and calamitous defensive mistakes early on. Wout Faes guilty of being loose with the pass. Tomare unaware of what was around him properly, and then compounded by Daniel Amate, and you give him away a needless penalty so early on in the game against a team that's rampant like Newcastle, and it just sparks them up even more, doesn't it? And even from that moment on, you feared the worst. But when the second goal went in, Almiron, who's been the star man of Newcastle of late, scampered through Leicester's ponderous rearguard, slotted it away. Leicester's fate was sealed really this afternoon. Yeah, absolutely. Newcastle, though, on a roll at the moment. They have 6 wins in a row. They are up to second in the Premier League table. Leicester staying in 13th, and are going to have to pick up if they're to improve after the change of the year. Full time here, though, on a disappointing day at King Power Stadium, Dan. A full time score of Leicester 0, Newcastle 3.
Yeah, thank you very much, James. Bitterly disappointing afternoon and Boxing Day here for Leicester City. Jerry Taggart, Steve Guppy and Matt Elliott will be with me, Dan Bates, as we assess that. Well, we've already used the term bitterly disappointing, Jerry, which is exactly what it's been.
Yeah, no miracle, was there, Dan?
No, we said maybe, didn't we? But
yeah, I think, the second half, Newcastle just did a professional job, just seen the game out, didn't go gun-ho trying to get the 4th goal. I'm not saying they didn't try not to, but they didn't go all guns blazing for it, and just seen the game out, and it was a bit of a nothing game in the second half, to be honest with you. Leicester obviously trying to push, making a couple of changes, looked slightly better in the second half, but really the game was over after half an hour, Dan. It's as simple as that. The 2 quick goals sort of ruined everybody's afternoon stroke evening, and the 3rd goal was that final hammer blow.
There was always half a chance, wasn't there, at 2-0, but as soon as it did go to 3-0, obviously that task became extremely difficult against a side that have conceded very few goals in the league this season.
Well, it just keep harping back to the first goal, really, because that's when it all started. Of course, it's just managing games, I guess. If you look at Newcastle now, second half, Eddie Howe has a reputation of playing, good possession game, but you see how they started the second half. Any free kick around the halfway line, they all went up. Just went up. We're not going to start playing pretty football. We've got our lead. We're going to hold on to it and do a good professional job, get it in Leicester's final third, and then try and win it back. Keep it there as long as possible. And you think back to the first couple of minutes where Newcastle gave the ball up in Leicester's half, and Leicester tried to play around the press. When these boys are on their first touches in the game, got no real rhythm going. Because you see in the second half when Newcastle's press was nowhere near as effective, because the Leicester players, they're into the game, they got their touch right, and they were able to play back. They were able to play through it, albeit no real consequence, nothing really came of it. But just managing games in the first few minutes, if you're not sure, then let's turn them, And I know it's like you say, what was that word you called it, Tags? A
dinosaurial.
A dinosaurial
style of football.
But sometimes you just gotta.
It just shows you though that I'm not saying Eddie Howe doesn't try and play nice football. He does, but he gets the basics right.
Manages the game, yeah.
And it's not fancy. You see them clearing the lines, booting it, trying to boot it over the stand, and defensively, where other teams are trying to, latch on to a ball and then try and play it out. And he's just clear your lines, reset, and then we'll go from there. And that's what you've seen all the way through the game. Gups is right. Free kicks, all long free kicks into the box, trying to put Leicester under pressure. Yes, they're a big team, but it's it's a basic style in general of football. There's nothing fanciful about it. There's nothing intricate really about it. But it's very, very effective, and there is still a place for that style of football in today's game.
And they played high up the pitch until the 90th minute, pretty much. I think there was a goal kick that Danny Ward took, and there was literally 3 Newcastle players on the edge of the Leicester box.
Well, why would you change it? You know, they had a lot of joy. They won the game basically off the back of it. So, I mean, it was just interesting to see Newcastle style. Obviously, seeing them live, they got a lot of joy early on. But like I say, you know, that early on you got a lot of energy, and the forwards on the front foot, and they press, and to get that, you know, win the ball back, and the penalty was obviously a major disappointment. But then when they were in the ascendancy on the ball, it was really what they were doing. Keeping the ball around the edge of the box, and, you know, give and goes, third man runs, you know, looked pretty good. They did it all the time, even in the second half. Whoever was on the ball, a defender would overlap, or a midfielder would come inside. All these different movements off the ball, pushing forward. Really, you know, apart from when Almiron scored that second goal, you know, they didn't really create loads of chances against Leicester, and that's the disappointment of the day, I guess. And it is just one game, and you're missing Maddison, of course. Maddison's a big part. You'd like to think he would have, you know, really picked a lock at some point. But if you know, when you're at home, you know, against a team right up there, the crowd are right up for it, and it was almost someone put a pin in it really early on, where if you could have kept it, turned them early on, kept it really tight, and then build some enthusiasm with the crowd and all those things that you need, all the advantages you get from playing at home. But it just was almost done and dusted after 7 minutes.
Yeah, you kind of did get that deflating feeling, didn't you, Matt, when, as Gubbs was just saying there, that Newcastle went 2-0 up within 7 minutes, and the fans that I can still hear now chanting in the background were pretty much the only ones chanting at that stage, and you can't even blame the Leicester fans for that. 2-0 down inside 7 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you know, as I mentioned there, the back end of the commentaries, you felt that Leicester's fate was sealed this afternoon after that second goal, albeit that early in the game. You know, so lacklustre that Leicester looked, but you knew that could change. You know that they have certain capabilities, but it's hard to pull yourself out of the quagmire, as our old manager Martin O'Neill used to say. You know, within the confines of one game, you can turn things round over the duration of a season, as we've seen with Leicester already this campaign. But they were coming up against, you know, a very confident, dominant outfit as well. We talked about the physicality of them. That was impressive. Their organisation, their application to the cause was also impressive at the majority of the time. And then they've got certain qualities in certain areas as well. And you just felt that from the crowd, from the players themselves as well, that they thought, uh-oh, we're up against it today. We've let this opportunity slip. It's going to go against us already, like that early. And I'm sure Leicester players will contest that was the case, but you just got that feel. You got that feel, Dan. And however much Leicester tried to get back into the game, you didn't feel like it was going to happen at any stage, to be honest.
Yeah, but as we referenced to half-time, probably the only time you felt maybe it could happen was at 2-0. Leicester had a period, didn't they? Daka had that opportunity where he was through. They had to score in that 10-minute period where they were on top if they wanted to get something from this game.
No, of course. You just need that momentum, something to change it, something to get the crowd involved, which all the advantages that you get from playing at home, of course. So it didn't happen today. It is just one game. Obviously, the problem with the Premiership, they come thick and fast, and Liverpool away, so now the pressure starts to build. But one game, you're missing Maddison. I think would potentially have made a difference today if Leicester could have kept it tighter early on, but wasn't to be.
No, it wasn't to be. But hopefully, we don't know the ins and outs exactly of James Maddison. Brendan Rodgers said something pre-game about a knee, and the fitness staff are taking a look at that. He was incidentally here, by the way, sat just behind the dugout, which that suggests, obviously, hopefully, touch wood, it isn't anything horrendous that requires him on crutches or anything like that. But we don't know what the situation is. We don't know when he might be back. But obviously, the hope is that isn't long term.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what's more frustrating is that there was a number of players this evening that didn't play to their full potential, what we've seen in recent times.
Is that again understandable? Playing devil's advocate a little bit, not trying to defend the players too much, but obviously they've not played for a
but then when
month.
you look at Newcastle, everybody was pulling in the same direction. So what excuse can you give to Leicester for not doing that? Because there was a few people off it tonight. Okay, and you've got to give Newcastle credit for that, because they come out of the blocks flying, and Leicester didn't. Leicester were just on the back foot right from the very off, and some of the players just didn't. After Newcastle hit them, when they was, lose 2 blows early on, they just couldn't get up the pace for the game, and it was just a struggle all the way through. It was like literally walking through a quagmire for them, and they couldn't get themselves out of it, and so that's more frustrating. Not starting the game well, because it's one of the last things a manager tells you before you go out on the football pitch is make sure you start the game well. It's one of the last things you'll hear from your captain, your manager, the coaches, and certain players around the dressing room. Start the game well, because that gives you the confidence to grow into the game, and this evening that didn't happen.
And then naturally, when you concede a penalty in 90 seconds, concede 2 goals in 7 minutes, that isn't a good start, and that means
it's a hammer blow.
You've got so much work to do.
Yeah, absolutely, it's a hammer blow. A 2-goal deficit, and you've got to play 83 minutes plus added on time, trying to search for 2 goals against the meanest defence in the Premier League. Good luck.
Yeah, another thing that you'd have looked at it today, Matt, and thought, okay, both teams were in good form before the World Cup. Obviously, Newcastle, we know how good they were, particularly they're up to second now in the Premier League, which proves just how good they've been. But with the break, you thought that could have been a leveller. Jerry said you don't almost look at the form because of what's happened in the break, but Newcastle were able to come out and play the likes of Miguel Almiron the way that he has been playing all season.
Yeah, very much so. I think it was a little bit sort of going into the unknown, wasn't it? And depending on how different players and teams as a whole would react, and no one really knew what the answers were going to be. I'm sure Eddie Howe even didn't know, but I'm sure he was hoping that they were going to produce a performance with the mentality that they showed today, and he'll be absolutely delighted. Brendan Rodgers will be scratching his head a little bit, because I'm sure he told his team probably similar things to Eddie Howe, and as Jerry's just mentioned, game after game after game, you're always told that and reminded of it. Start the game well, particularly at home. Test them out early on, see if they're up for it, etc. Leicester weren't able to do that at all, and quite the opposite, in fact, wasn't it? So it was, it was a game of contrast in terms of, sort of mentality, I thought, out there, and in terms of physicality as well. But it was very disappointing. Leicester gave themselves too much to do, didn't they, with that sloppy start. Then all of a sudden it becomes a bit scrappy, because Newcastle can sort of sit back and wait for their opportunities to break on the counter, or wait for those set pieces, which they benefited from with the 3rd goal. And Leicester all of a sudden is a little bit hurried. They can't be too composed with their play. They can't be patient, because then they get the crowd on the back a little bit, and they start forcing passes that aren't really on and giving it away, and it just goes from bad to worse, really. So it's it's a very difficult situation to deal with, but they can't let it affect them. They've had disappointments, and they'll have disappointments in future, won't they? But Liverpool away coming up, different sort of game, but like any game, they've got to be ready for the challenge and the task ahead.
Yeah, we'll talk about that Liverpool game, in just a moment, but the television company, the broadcasters that are doing the game today, they've given the man of the match to Bruno, the Newcastle midfielder, of course, and there was a moment towards the end of the game that kind of summed up Newcastle's attitude towards this.
That's everything you need to know about Newcastle at the minute. There's I think it's Dewsbury Hall has the ball on the left hand byline. Is it a throw-in line, whatever you call it? Can't remember. Touchline, that's it. I forgot. And he goes to play a ball down the line, and Gomares comes sliding in, gets a block, puts it away for a Leicester throw-in. But his reaction to just getting something on it, it's like he literally just won the World Cup. He was up, and he was like giving it the full biff there to the fans, And that's, I'm not saying Leicester didn't want to win today. Of course they did, but it just sort of shows you that those little differences. Matty mentioned it. I think mentally more than anything. Yeah, there was a a difference in the physical size and everything else that Newcastle had today. It's, you know, it's there for all to see, but the mentality of Newcastle, you know, it's like a rolling stone down a big hill, no moss on it. I think Leicester might have just gathered a few little tiny bits of moss after today's defeat.
There had to be one analogy, Jerry, didn't there, today? We got it fairly late on. Obviously, I know that you've been across the pond and maybe not seen too much of Leicester's season, but they drew one game in their opening 7, lost the other 6. Obviously, it was a really difficult start. There were a number of moments where we'd be sat in this studio saying, okay, after a difficult defeat, they've got to put that behind them immediately. And that's the case again tonight, isn't it?
Of course it is. I mean, we're talking about Bruno giving that display of energy to the crowd. It's easy to do that when you're 3-0 up, of course. You know, and that really was the problem today, is that Newcastle were always, we used to have a saying that when you weren't playing well, you're everywhere the ball's just been. And we had that thrown at us a few times, Jerry, when we played. And that's how it felt like for Leicester today. Well, you get games like that, you forget them when you're retired, but they did happen. And it was one of those games where just Newcastle were on their toes, Leicester were on their heels. It's a mental thing. It's not always about tactics and structure. You know, no real Leicester player rolled up their sleeves, grabbed the game by the scruff of the neck and tried to make something happen. I didn't see a midfielder burst through into space on the ball, try and take someone on and create something. I didn't see it the whole game. You know, and these are the things when you're at home that the crowd sort of cling to you, and you need, you know, they come here and they give it their best for the team. Of course they do, but you need to help them. You need to give them something to work with, and I'm sure in weeks gone by, especially the recent run, you know, Leicester have done that. It just didn't happen today.
What was that term that you used? Sometimes you're just where the ball has just been.
You're everywhere the ball's just been.
Well, Thierry Henry never thought that was you, though, Jerry, did he?
There we go.
Well, maybe his memory's gone a bit as well. But yeah, you know, it was a nice touch from him.
I've set you up for a nice easy one there, Jerry. Sorry, Matt, I had to get it in at some point. Obviously, we're smiling now, but it's not been a happy day, has it, for Leicester? And you mentioned that Liverpool game coming up in a few days. It's important that they do reset and go again going into that one.
That to me, Batesy, yeah?
It is, yeah.
Yeah, major disappointment today, isn't it? No, yeah, had the sort of excitement, so entertainment of the World Cup, and some people think it's a distraction, whichever way you look at it, but you know, people sort of licking their lips at getting back into the Premier League situation, and then you know, Boxing Day and everything that brings, and the festive period. And a full house, the crowd, the atmosphere was buzzing outside the stadium, and you know, a couple of hours or so before the game, despite the cold temperatures, etc., and everyone's looking forward to a good game against good opposition. But there was, you know, a decent chance of Leicester performing and getting a result. Everyone believed that, but it didn't materialise, did it? And you know, it was a big blow. It was a big blow, and especially in the manner with which it came around. But having said that, you know, listen, Leicester have come up against bigger adversities before. Early on this season, you know, it seemed catastrophic, and they've turned that round. So they're capable of turning things around again. But Liverpool away, tough proposition for sure. And like I said before, it's a different type of game. But one thing's for sure, surely they are going to be switched on, because if you don't, you can get absolutely terrorised by the likes of Salah, Firmino, etc. Luiz, he's injured, is he? I believe. But whichever team Liverpool put out, they're going to be at it. The atmosphere at Anfield, Leicester have got to be prepared, and the players, I'm sure, will be. Now, this has been a severe kick up the backside, shall we say. They can't afford to let that drift into the game against Liverpool coming up in a few days. But it's going to be a tough proposition, however well they play. But looking forward to it nonetheless.
They've actually got a little bit more time than what you normally would around the festive period, Jerry, haven't they? Going into that one. What is that? That's Friday, isn't it? And we're on Friday. Monday today, so it's a good couple of days, a good 3 or 4 days to prepare for that one.
Listen, we're just bitterly disappointed and frustrated, because you had two teams who were in great form at the end of the sorry, at the beginning of the break before the World Cup started, and then it's come to them, we didn't see the full potential that Leicester showed in their last game against West Ham. That's the most frustrating thing for most people, but in the bigger scheme of things, you know, let's not lose sight of what's been achieved over the last 6 to 8 weeks, you know, leading up to this point. You know, it's been quite a magnificent turnaround by Brendan Rodgers and his staff, obviously the players, and so you've got to say this is a blip on the road. Yes, it would have been nice to come out of this game with something going into the game against Liverpool, but that's football and it is what it is, and now you've got to reset and prepare, recover for the game against Liverpool on Friday night.
You're nodding along, but it is almost easier said than done, I guess, being in there to do that. How difficult is it? You know what it's like. You've all played in teams where you've suffered disappointing defeats and then you've had to go again a few days later. Yeah, but
you could look at it two ways. Of course, you could be very despondent about the result, the performance, whatever you want, but you know, there's a game against Liverpool in the Premiership coming up on Friday. If you don't get up for that, you are struggling, right? And I think the players will look upon that. Of course, it'll be difficult. They'll come with different challenges. Liverpool are a great side, we know that. But you know, it's a chance to go and play at Anfield, and you know, and put your own, you know, qualities up against their best players as well. And I think, you know, the Leicester players will be really up for that. Of course, they'll be disappointed. Everyone wants to win their home game, especially after a break, and especially after what you know, Jerry said, after a great run. Didn't happen. You know, it was all fizzled out very early on, and it was just a grind after that. But we go again Friday, you know, and I'm sure everyone will be ready for that. You know, it's a fantastic game to go. You know, go to Liverpool to play. It'd be brilliant.
Yeah, I guess, Jerry, as you've sort of half referenced yourself, these things happen in football. You'll get these days.
You do, and you know, okay, maybe Newcastle don't, and we've seen why though. We've seen why. But at the minute, Leicester, you know, as I said, they've had a tough start to the season. You know, dragged their way back from, you know, the depths of despair into a really healthy position in the league. They've come back from the World Cup break, and it just hasn't happened. We've seen it the other night against MK Dons, where things seem to click into place almost straight away. But then you're talking about a different calibre of team here today. You know, you've got to give Newcastle credit somewhere along the line as well. You know, it takes two to tango, it takes two to play a game of football. And the opposition, you have to mention them. They deserve that today. They are a useful outfit, very efficient, and everybody pulling in the right direction. So that, as Matty said, is hopefully the kick up the rear end they need to get everyone back on the same page, pulling in the right. I'm not saying they're not pulling in the right direction, but I mean, as far as Brendan wanting to play this passing game, it just didn't quite happen today. So it'll have to be that little bit slicker, that little bit more tuned in, focus, whatever you want to call it, you know, come Friday night against Liverpool.
Yeah, do you agree, Matt, with what Steve was saying about it being at Anfield, being against Liverpool? Sometimes for those types of games, you don't need any extra motivation, do you, going into that one? Does it maybe... It's a good thing it's a really tough game like that coming up next?
Well, you shouldn't need extra motivation, you know, regardless of who the opposition are. This manner of the defeat and the way it came about should stir them into action. But the fact is, against Liverpool, and at Anfield and everything that brings, of course, you know, it's going to get you up for the game. Like Steve says, you want to... You've got two choices, haven't you? Roll up your sleeves and give it your best shot, or you can hang around, mope around, and then you get a real tonking. If you feel sorry for yourself against the likes of Liverpool, it's only going one way, isn't it? So, you know, footballers are not naturally, people say, but the footballers have to learn to become resilient to situations, and they face adversity, you know, in different ways on regular occasions throughout their careers. And you know, this is a blip, of course. It's a setback and it's a disappointment, but it's not catastrophic. It doesn't mean Leicester's season is in absolute turmoil, and they've got an opportunity to balance things up a little bit. And all of a sudden, Leicester produce a performance out of somewhere against Liverpool and get the result. dare I say it, this performance and result will be pretty much forgotten quickly. So that's how quick things can turn around. It seems unlikely at the moment, but stranger things have happened.
It actually reminds me of last season, Jerry. Leicester lost on Boxing Day, well 6-3 it was, but it was fairly convincing away at Man City. Liverpool were the next game, albeit at King Power Stadium. Everyone expected an injury-ravaged Leicester to lose that game convincingly. They won 1-0 and that was a real catalyst moving into the second half of the season.
No, absolutely. I think, I haven't got the exact stats on Leicester's Boxing Day performance, but they haven't been pretty good for a long time. I think they've only won 2 out of the last 16, something like that there. But someone can pick me up. But I read that somewhere, something along those lines anyway. So yeah, hopefully that's an omen we don't have to rely on as the Boxing Day, scourge, shall we call it. But yeah, listen, there's good. Liverpool, by the way, aren't firing on all cylinders. They've got their own issues, as you will well know, Dan. That they're not exactly, I'm not saying Leicester don't have to be worried of Liverpool and make sure that they prepare properly. Of course that'll happen, but there's opportunities there against Liverpool on Friday night, and as I said, it's all about making sure that you go into the game putting this game well and firmly behind you.
Last couple of bits really quickly now. We'll just concentrate on you again for the moment. You're going back just before New Year, aren't you? And as we said at the very top of the show a couple of hours ago, 2nd of January, did you say that's the start of pre-season for you guys now over in Nashville?
Yeah, it's all coming around pretty quickly. So the slog of pre-season starts early January. So we're probably we're going to be down in Florida for about a month, give or take, because a lot of other MLS teams are down there, so you get the chance to play pre-season friendlies and what have you, and of course the warmer weather. So
which is
lovely.
Needed at the moment
sounds
over there.
Nice at the moment, but it will be hard work.
Still waiting on
for the
me
players
invite.
anyway.
Still waiting on me invite.
Always got an invite, Terry. Open invitation.
We could go do a feature, Jerry, couldn't we? That'll be the way to go. Right, very quickly as well. Aims, hopes for the season. You said the playoffs. You've reached those a few times, or every season. So
we've set the standard now. We made the playoffs every year so far. So that's always going to be the aim, to try and make that. But it's always very, very difficult. There's a lot of decent teams in the MLS, a lot of investment. So it feels like every year it gets harder and harder. But we've managed to strengthen in a couple of areas, so we're hopeful that we're going to do all right. But obviously, you never know until you get into the midst of it. I'm looking forward to getting back now and getting on with pre-season and getting back with the players and hopefully we'll make some moves.
Well, best of luck for it, and thanks again for fitting us into your tight schedule around Christmas while you're back in England. Thanks as ever to Matt, to Jerry, and obviously we've said again to Steve there for their time today. It's been disappointing for Leicester. There's plenty more to come though here on LCFC TV over the coming days, this week really, as we head in towards the new year. We've been talking about that Liverpool game, of course, at Anfield. That's on Friday evening. You can join us from 7 p.m. as it's an 8 o'clock kickoff there on Friday, the day before New Year's Eve. Following that, we'll be back again with extra time on the 2nd of January to assess that game against Liverpool and also look ahead to the Fulham game, which is the day after that. And Leicester's the Place, a brand new podcast with Jerry Taggart and Matt Elliott as the two hosts in that. Robert Huth was one of the guests in that. I think even during your time over at Christmas, Steve Guppy's done one of those. That'll be coming up fairly soon as well. But that's a brilliant hour and a half actually with Rob Hoofy, so you can listen to that at your own leisure, or you can even watch it on YouTube as well. With two quality presenters at LCFC TV. Well, thanks again to these three, in particular Steve, for their company today. But unfortunately on Boxing Day, it's been a bitterly disappointing afternoon for the Foxes.